Welcome to our deep dive today. We're going deep on Cal Newport's deep work. We're going to help you figure out how to bring more focus and flow into your own life, with all the distractions and stuff we have today.
Yeah, it's funny, actually. Newport's ideas from back in 2016 seem even more relevant now,
Right.
It's almost like he predicted how crucial deep work would be
Totally.
in our world today.
Okay, so let's start with the basics for people who maybe haven't read deep work. How does Newport define deep work? What is it exactly?
He defines it as professional activities, work activities that require really intense distraction-free concentration.
Okay.
So it's about pushing your cognitive abilities to their limit. You're really trying to produce variable work that's hard for other people to replicate.
So it's not just working hard, it's working smart.
Right. Exactly.
Okay, and he contrasts this with shallow work. What does shallow work look like?
Think of shallow work as those tasks that we do while we're distracted. So things like checking email, scrolling through social media, attending those meetings that could have been an email, all that stuff. Those things that don't create a lot of new value, and really anyone can do them.
Right. Like busy work almost.
Yeah, exactly.
It makes me think of that story Newport shares about Carl Jung, the psychologist.
Yes.
He built a stone tower in the woods just to escape distractions.
Yeah, that's a great story.
And focus on writing. I mean, imagine.
Yeah, can you imagine the commitment to your craft to build a whole tower just to get that deep work?
It's pretty inspiring.
It shows how much he valued that focus and concentration.
Totally, yeah. Makes you wonder if we've lost sight of that a little bit, in today's world. Okay, so how does this all connect to the modern economy? Why is deep work so valuable in today's world?
There are a couple of key reasons.
Okay.
One is deep work helps you master complex skills quickly. And that's so essential in a world where technology is constantly evolving, right? So the faster you can learn, the better you'll be able to adapt and thrive.
Right, because we're always being asked to learn new software, new systems. Everything changes so fast.
Absolutely. It's hard to keep up.
Yeah.
And then the second reason is that deep work allows you to produce at a really elite level in a way that's hard to replicate. And this is so important in a world where anyone can connect with anyone else online.
Right.
So that ability to really produce high-quality work that stands out becomes a huge advantage.
Oh, you have to stand out.
You do.
In a noisy world.
You can't just keep up. You have to stand out.
I like that. I like that a lot. And actually, Newport uses a great example to kind of illustrate this point. He talks about Nate Silver, the statistician who's famous for forecasting elections.
Oh, yes.
So tell me about that.
Right. So Nate Silver, he mastered this really complex statistical analysis software called Stata.
Oh, wow.
And then he was able to use that to build this massive database of poll results. And this is what allows him to make those incredibly accurate predictions.
So he went deep.
He went deep.
With the technology.
And that's what sets him apart and makes his work so valuable.
Yeah, it gave him a competitive edge.
Right.
Okay, but here's the thing. If deep work is so valuable, why is it becoming so rare? That's the weird thing.
Well, that's the paradox, right?
Totally, yeah.
As valuable as it's becoming, it's also becoming increasingly difficult to achieve.
Yeah.
And there are a few reasons for that.
Well, that's what we're going to get into.
Yes, we are.
Newport talks about a trend towards shallowness in a lot of work settings. What's driving that?
I think a few things are at play.
Okay.
One is the rise of distractions in the workplace, right?
Oh, yeah.
Think open offices, constant emails, IMs, social media notifications. It's kind of a recipe for fractured attention.
Oh my gosh. It's like we're constantly bombarded by things vying for our attention.
Yeah.
It's hard to find any space to just be quiet and do focused work.
Totally. And then there's this thing Newport calls the metric black hole, which is this idea that it's tough for businesses to measure the negative impact of distractions on their bottom line.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Makes sense.
So they don't always see the need to change things.
But isn't there a danger in only valuing what's easily measured?
Sure.
I mean, what about the hidden costs of distraction, like decreased creativity and innovation, stuff that's harder to quantify?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's something businesses really need to be thinking about more seriously, I think.
For sure.
And then finally, there's this pervasive idea of busyness as a proxy for productivity. This idea that if you look busy, you must be productive, right?
Oh, that always-on mentality.
Yes.
I felt that pressure, for sure.
Yeah, you feel like you constantly have to be responding to emails, checking messages to prove that you're working.
Exactly.
And a great example that Newport gives of this is Marissa Mayer, the former CEO of Yahoo, Remember when she banned work from home?
I do. I remember that.
Yeah, it caused quite a stir.
Yes.
And one of the reasons was because employees weren't logging into the VPN enough throughout the day. So to her, that suggested they weren't visibly busy enough.
Right.
Even though their actual output might have been totally fine.
So she was equating busyness with productivity, essentially.
Right.
Which is interesting because it seems like what we're saying is the opposite is true.
In a way, yeah.
That busyness can actually work against deep work.
It can.
Okay. So we've got this strange situation where deep work is both incredibly valuable but increasingly rare. It's like this hidden advantage just waiting to be exploited.
It is.
So that leads us to the big question. How do we actually cultivate a deep work ethic and start incorporating more of it into our own lives?
Right.
Especially with all these challenges.
Yeah.
That's what I want to know. I want to know how to do that.
Right.
And Newport has some really interesting ideas about what he calls depth philosophies, which are basically structured strategies for integrating deep work into your life. This is where things start to get really practical.
This is where the rubber meets the road.
Yes.
And he outlines 4 main philosophies
Okay.
that we'll explore.
I'm ready. Tell me.
Okay. So we know deep work is valuable and that we really have to be intentional about cultivating it.
Yeah.
But how do we actually train our minds to go deep, especially with all the distractions that we face every day?
That's the big question, right? Like I can say, okay, I'm going to focus more, but actually doing it consistently.
Right.
That's so hard.
It is. And our brains aren't really wired for depth in the world that we live in today, right?
Right.
That's why Newport suggests some pretty concrete strategies to strengthen our concentration muscles.
Okay, I like that. I like that analogy a lot.
Yeah.
So one of the things that really stuck out to me was this idea of scheduling internet blocks.
Yes.
Which almost seems counterintuitive in our always connected world, but the more I thought about it, the more it made sense.
It's not about quitting the internet entirely, because that's just not realistic for most of us, right?
Right.
It's about being more deliberate and intentional with how we use it.
Okay.
So Newport's point is that we need to regain control of our attention, and scheduling internet blocks is one way to help us do that.
So instead of just like passively reacting to every notification or urge to check our phones or whatever, we proactively set aside specific times for internet use.
Exactly.
And then outside of those blocks, we're completely offline.
Right.
So we're breaking that constant cycle of distraction.
Yes. And what's so interesting about that strategy is it doesn't just help us focus when we're working deeply, but it also makes our internet use more productive.
I can see that because if you know you only have a limited window to check email or scroll through social media, you're going to be way more mindful of how you spend that time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're not as likely to fall into those rabbit holes of mindless clicking and scrolling.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It's about being intentional and prioritizing what really matters.
And it's interesting to think about it in the context of what we were talking about earlier about busyness as a proxy for productivity.
Yes.
Scheduling internet blocks is almost like a rebellion against that whole mindset.
It's like saying, I'm not going to be constantly available. I'm going to choose when and how I connect.
Yeah, I love that it's about taking back control of your time and attention.
Absolutely.
Instead of letting them be dictated by, these external forces.
Right. Reclaiming your autonomy in a world that's constantly trying to grab your attention.
Yes. And there's another strategy that Newport talks about that I find really intriguing.
Okay.
He calls it embracing boredom.
Embracing boredom.
Yeah, it sounds a little strange, right? We're always told to stay busy, fill every spare moment with something stimulating.
Right. That's the prevailing message.
Yeah.
But think about it. When was the last time you just let yourself be bored?
Honestly, I can't even remember.
Right.
I've gotten so used to constantly stimulating my mind that I've forgotten what it even feels like to just be.
And that's the problem. We've become so accustomed to that constant stimulation that our ability to tolerate boredom has atrophied.
Okay.
And ironically, that makes it even harder to focus for extended periods.
Right. It's like our attention spans have become addicted to that quick hit of dopamine we get from notifications and updates. And when we don't get it, we just get restless and distracted.
Exactly. And that's why Newport proposes that we deliberately expose ourselves to boredom.
Okay.
So don't immediately reach for your phone when you're waiting in line, or you find yourself with a few minutes of downtime.
Okay.
Resist that urge to fill every empty space with stimulation.
So it's about building those mental muscles for focusing.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly. It's like any muscle.
Yeah.
Our attention spans need to be exercised and challenged.
And he shares a story about Barrington Thurston, the writer and comedian who did an experiment where he disconnected from the internet completely for 25 days. 25 days offline, which I can't even imagine 25 minutes without checking my phone.
Right.
But that was the whole point. He wanted to see what would happen if he just totally broke free from that constant connectivity.
Yes.
And what he found was that he became incredibly aware of how distracting these network tools really are. And he was able to experience a level of clarity and insight he hadn't felt in a long time.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that sometimes we need to disconnect in order to truly connect with ourselves and our deeper thoughts.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about scheduling internet blocks and embracing boredom.
Yes.
What are some other strategies that Newport recommends for cultivating a deep work ethic?
Well, he also emphasizes the importance of being really intentional about our tool selection.
Okay.
And that's where the craftsman approach comes in.
Yes, the craftsman approach.
Yeah.
This is something that really resonated with me when I was reading the book.
Yes.
It's about shifting our mindset from what can this tool do for me to does this tool support the core activities that really determine success and happiness in my life?
Yes, exactly. It's about rejecting what he calls the any benefit mindset. This feeling that if a tool offers any potential benefit, we're obligated to use it.
Oh, I know that feeling all too well. I've signed up for so many apps and services that promise to make me more productive or connected or whatever, only to find that they just ended up being another source of distraction.
Right, another thing vying for our attention.
Totally. It's easy to get caught up in that hype and think that the latest app or gadget is going to be the solution to all our problems.
Right, but the craftsman approach encourages us to be more discerning about the tools that we allow into our lives.
So it's about choosing quality over quantity when it comes to our tools, both physical and digital.
Exactly. And he has a couple of strategies for putting this into practice.
Okay.
One is applying the 80-20 rule, also known as the law of the vital few,
Yes.
to our internet habits.
Okay, so we need to identify those few online activities that produce the majority of our desired results, and then ruthlessly eliminate everything else.
But the tools that don't support those activities exactly.
Yeah, through the clutter.
Yes. And another strategy he suggests is taking a digital Sabbath.
A day of rest for our digital lives.
Exactly. And it could be a whole day or even just a few hours where you completely disconnect from all devices and online platforms.
I like that.
It's a way to gain a clearer understanding of how these tools are really impacting your life, both positively and negatively.
It's like hitting the reset button.
Yes, exactly.
On your relationship with technology.
And it can help you make more informed decisions about which tools to keep in your life and which ones to let go of.
Become the master of your technology rather than letting it master you.
Yes, and there's one more point that Newport makes that I think is worth highlighting here.
Okay.
He emphasizes the importance of scheduling in advance when we'll use certain tools and for what purpose.
So instead of passively reacting to the demands of our devices, we take a more proactive approach.
Exactly. We decide ahead of time, okay, I'm going to check email for 30 minutes in the morning and 30 minutes in the afternoon, and that's it.
Right, and that way you're not constantly getting pulled away from your deep work.
Exactly.
By all the pings and notifications.
You're in control.
I like that a lot.
And he uses a really interesting example to illustrate this point.
Okay.
He talks about Malcolm Gladwell and Michael Lewis, both mega best-selling authors who have consciously chosen not to use Twitter.
Wait, they don't use Twitter at all?
Nope. And I think it's a really powerful statement. They've recognized that Twitter, for all of its potential benefits, doesn't really align with the core activities that contribute to their writing success.
Right. It's a good reminder that sometimes the most productive thing you can do is just say no to certain tools, even if they're really popular.
Yes, exactly. It's about being selective and making choices that are aligned with your values and your goals.
So we've covered a lot of ground here: scheduling internet blocks, embracing boredom, taking a craftsman approach to tool selection.
Yes.
It's clear that reclaiming our attention and our focus requires a conscious effort.
It does.
But what about downtime?
Yes.
Isn't it important to take breaks and recharge, even when we're trying to cultivate this deep work ethic?
That's a great question, and it's something that Newport addresses directly in the book. Okay, downtime is absolutely crucial for the quality of our deep work.
Okay.
And for a couple of key reasons.
Okay, hit me with those reasons. Convince me that it's okay to step away from the desk sometimes.
Okay. So downtime, it's more than just important. It's like essential. And Newport gives us two really compelling reasons why.
Okay, lay them on me. Convince me that it's okay to step away from the desk every now and then.
Okay, so first, downtime can actually help you generate insights. Like when you step away from a problem and give your unconscious mind some time to kind of grapple with it, you often come back with fresh perspectives and solutions that you wouldn't have thought of before.
Like those aha moments you get in the shower or on a walk.
Exactly.
When you're not even actively thinking about the problem.
Right. It's like your brain is working on it in the background even when you're not consciously aware of it.
It is.
And Newport, he highlights some really fascinating research by this Dutch psychologist named Abe Dijksterhuis, who found that for certain types of decisions, we actually make better choices after a period of unconscious processing.
So sometimes the best way to solve a problem is to just stop thinking about it.
Yeah. Interesting.
It's counterintuitive, but it's true.
Totally. And what was the second reason?
The second reason downtime is so important is that it helps us recharge our mental energy.
Okay.
When we're doing deep work, we're essentially depleting our mental reserves. It's like a muscle getting tired after a workout, you know?
Right, yeah.
If we don't give our brains a chance to rest and recover, we're going to burn out.
Makes sense. You can't run a marathon without taking breaks.
Exactly. Downtime allows us to return to our deep work with renewed focus and energy.
Okay, that makes sense.
It's a crucial part of the process. But I want to shift gears a little bit. One question that's been kind of lingering in my mind throughout this whole deep dive is, is deep work just about productivity? Or is there something more to it, something deeper?
That's a great question. And it seems like there is something more meaningful going on here.
And Newport actually addresses this in the book.
He does.
He believes that deep work isn't just a productivity technique. It's a path to a more meaningful and fulfilling life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He introduces this idea of Homo sapiens depensis.
Okay.
To capture this notion that humans are wired for depth.
Yeah.
And that we actually find meaning in deep work and focused engagement.
Yeah, and it's not just like a philosophical idea.
Right.
There's actually a lot of evidence to support this.
Yeah.
I mean, think about the satisfaction you feel after you've really mastered a skill or created something valuable.
Right.
Like that sense of accomplishment and purpose, it's like deeply ingrained in us.
It is. It taps into something very fundamental about our nature.
Yeah, and those moments of depth when we're fully immersed in a challenging and meaningful task, those aren't just enjoyable, they're essential to our well-being.
They are. It's like those moments of flow you get when you're so absorbed in what you're doing that time seems to disappear, you know? And Newport argues that cultivating this capacity for deep work isn't just about getting things done. It's about becoming the best versions of ourselves.
It's about living a more intentional life.
Yeah.
A more fulfilling life, one that's rich with meaning and purpose.
Right. And in order to do that, we have to drain the shallows.
Oh, yes. Draining the shallows.
This idea of being really ruthless in eliminating or reducing those low-value activities that kind of clutter our days and drain our mental energy.
It's like decluttering our schedules, but instead of getting rid of physical objects, we're getting rid of tasks and commitments that don't really add value to our lives.
Exactly. And one of the most effective ways to drain the shallows is to work less.
Work less. That sounds like a dream come true, but is that even possible in today's always-on culture?
It is, and Newport points to this great example of this software company, 37 Signals.
Oh yeah, I've heard of them.
Who famously shortened their work week to 4 days during the summer months.
Okay.
And what they found was that their employees were just as productive, if not more so.
With one less day of work. I would think less time would equal less output. How did they pull that off?
What they discovered was that when they eliminated that day of work, they were disproportionately eliminating shallow work.
Ah, that makes sense.
The deep work, the really valuable stuff, remained largely untouched. So it's a great illustration of how those shallow tasks can create this illusion of busyness without actually contributing much to the bottom line.
So by working less, they were actually able to focus more on what really mattered.
Exactly. And it sounds like this experiment had some pretty positive ripple effects as well.
Yeah, what happened?
They reported increased productivity, happier employees, a greater sense of balance. And, you know, they even took this experiment a step further.
Okay.
They set aside an entire month where employees could work exclusively on passion projects.
What a whole month dedicated to deep work and exploration. That's incredible.
Right. And some really incredible things came out of that month.
Like what?
They developed new product features, they improved internal processes, and they even came up with entirely new business ideas. It was a testament to the power of creating space for deep work and allowing people to dive deep into something they're passionate about.
It makes you wonder what we could all achieve if we had a little more time and space for focused, uninterrupted work.
Right.
But realistically, not all of us can just take a month off to work on passion projects.
Of course not. But the principle still applies. We can all find ways to drain the shallows in our own lives, even if it's just small changes at first.
Yeah.
It might be something as simple as scheduling fewer meetings or setting boundaries around email, or it might mean taking a more radical approach, like reducing your work hours or even changing careers.
It's about being intentional and making choices that align with your values and goals.
Exactly.
Okay, so are there any specific tactics for draining the shallows that Newport recommends? Because I'd love to hear some actionable strategies.
He does one tactic he suggests is scheduling every minute of your day.
Every minute. That sounds a little intense, to be honest.
I know it sounds a bit extreme.
Yeah.
But hear me out. It's not about being rigid or controlling. It's about becoming more aware of how you're actually spending your time.
Okay.
And by scheduling everything, even those little chunks of time that we tend to let slip away, you force yourself to make deliberate choices about what you do and don't do.
So you're taking ownership of your time.
Exactly.
Making sure it's aligned with your priorities.
And another tactic he recommends is quantifying the depth of every activity.
So basically rating each task on a scale of like how much focus it requires.
Precisely. And by doing that, you can start to identify those shallow activities that are kind of masquerading as important work.
Shining a light on those time wasters that are subtly draining our energy and focus.
Exactly. And once we see them clearly, we can start to eliminate or reduce them.
It's a process of continuous improvement.
It is.
Okay, well, this has been a fantastic deep dive.
It has.
I feel like I have a much better understanding of deep work now.
Me too.
And how to incorporate it into my own life. But if you could leave our listeners with one final thought to ponder, what would it be?
Here's a question to consider. If you could spend just 1 hour per day, completely disconnected and focused on a challenging and meaningful task, what would you choose to do?
Okay.
And what might you achieve over the next year if you committed to that 1 hour of deep work every day?
That's a powerful question. It really makes you think about all the possibilities.
It does.
Thanks so much for sharing your insights with me today.
My pleasure. I really enjoyed it.
And to our listener, we hope this deep dive has inspired you to embrace the power of deep work and create more space for it in your own life. Until next time, keep going deep.